his mind. You know what your greatest need is here today? It's mine. You need to change your mind. But in order to change your mind, it gets back to the first thing we were teaching. You need to know what's true. You need to know what's true. And because of little study and extremely poor preaching, most Christians, even Christians, are filled with so many wrong thoughts. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Let me just give you an example, and maybe we'll be able to touch on it. Just, now get ready, okay? What makes you think youth groups are biblical? Who told you that? What makes you think that children ought to be with children? That's exactly what you believe. You believe children, when they go to church, ought to be with children, don't you? You believe children ought to play together, they ought to be grouped together, all these sorts of things. That's what you believe. All of you probably believe that. Well, you know, children need to be with children. Do you know that's a direct contradiction of Scripture? Find it for me in Scripture where it says children ought to be with children. I'll give you $1 million. Find it for me. Who told you that? I'll tell you who told you that. The hippies in the 60s. Generation gap that never even existed prior to that. Evolutionary thought that tells you that children, basically, their development kind of parallels the development of species, and that they need to be grouped together. Do you know what the Bible teaches? It teaches just the opposite. That the one who runs with fools will be destroyed. A companion of fools will be destroyed. But he who walks with wise men will be wise. Now, I'm not saying you can't teach children together, and I'm not saying that you can't have young people get together. But what I'm telling you is your children are raised by other children. The most important people oftentimes in your children's life is not their mom and their dad or their brothers and sisters. It's their friends at school. And that's all they want to do is get out of the house to get to those friends. And you have effectively destroyed your family with wrong thinking. You see, my point is not to talk about family at this moment. My point is to say you can have all kinds of wrong thinking. I was teaching at the Martin Lloyd-Jones Fellowship a few years ago in England. And they asked me to teach on children. So I started teaching on children. And this guy raised his hand and he says, well, how are your children going to be socialized if they're just around you and other grown-ups? And I said, last night I was really hungry and I was looking for fish and chips, so I went to High Street. And I saw countless teenagers out there. Some of them, not even teenagers, 11, 12, 13. Matter of fact, I heard some girls who couldn't have been more than 12 years old talking about things out loud, on the street, and doing things with their body that I never saw in my worst days as a drunk in any bar. So just how do you want my children to be socialized by them? See, he had been taught wrong thinking. His children needed to be socialized or they couldn't be accepted in this world. Oh, I didn't know they were supposed to be accepted by 12-year-olds who speak worse than a drunken sailor. You see, all these things that we're often told, and they're just lies, and evangelicalism is filled with them. And so, we can't change our mind as we ought to because we don't know what's true and we don't know what's a lie because the Scriptures are so neglected. And that is why it is our task primarily to be men and women of the Word, so that we can reject the lie, change our mind, and be in line with what God would have us do, with the life that God would have us to live. Present your bodies to God. Your bodies. That means everything. Whatever these eyes do, find out, according to the Scriptures, what does God want my eyes doing? What does God want my ears hearing? What does He not want my ears to hear? What does God say about my hands, my feet, the direction of my life? And then you start, because Christ died for you, seeking to conform your life no longer to the standard of this age, but according to the will of God. Now, how long am I supposed to go?